seeing a growing trend of governments hacking into their own citizens' cell phones. A lot of times it just seems to do with what career you've chosen. Just in the last few weeks, we have Apple notifying a few journalists, hey, we have evidence that your phone has been hacked. And then when it was looked into, the people doing the hacking were those journalists' own government using spyware. And just a few days after that story, we've got Washington Post coming out and saying that they've caught hackers from China in their journalists' email boxes. And then on top of that, if you're crossing the border into the US, it's now fair game that they can require you to show them your social media posts. So whether you're a journalist or someone just posting on social media, there's a lot of governments out there that seem real keen to get into your data. But why are governments hacking into their own journalists' cell phones to keep watch on them? I want to dig into all these stories. I've also got a forensics report going through the exact method that the spyware used to get on the journalist's phone. And then I want to talk about how you can protect against that. And speaking about protecting your data on your phones, I want to mention the sponsor of today's video, Cape. I know a lot of cybersecurity experts switching all of their mobile devices over to Cape's new cell network. It's because they're built from the ground up with security and privacy in mind. Compare that to the other major telcos who can't seem to get enough of your data, and they also can't seem to stop losing it or selling it. I went to pull up Cape's site to record this sponsor message, and usually I got to close out one of those GDPR banners on the bottom that talk about all the tracking that website is doing. I almost reflexively hit the X here, and then all of a sudden I noticed the banner says, hey, we don't use cookies. We mean it when we say we track less. So I had to leave it in. A few things that Cape does to protect your data is to just not collect as much of it as they do not need. They can't lose and they can't sell what they don't collect. They might ask for some information up front when you're like paying for your account and setting it up that they're legally required to collect. But the only thing that they store is your phone number. They don't store your email. They don't store your date of birth. They don't store your address, so they can't sell it or lose it. They also have some of the most advanced SIM swap protections, which is rampant on all the other networks. Basically, someone could call one of the major telcos pretending to be you, and as long as they can convince that customer support agent that they're you, the agent will just swap your entire phone number, including all your text messages, phone calls, voicemails, whatever, to whatever phone that they want. This happens again and again, especially to go after your two-factor codes that are getting sent to your phone number. It's super easy to switch your current device over to Cape. And as this video is about hacking journalists, I'd be remiss to not show that some of the top journalists on the planet are switching their devices to Cape, like Nicole Perloff, who covered cybersecurity for the New York Times. They've also partnered with other security and privacy first companies like Proton. So if you sign up for Cape, A, use my discount code in the description below, and B, you can get Proton for $1. I'm really excited to see what Cape's building, and I'm really grateful that they chose to support the channel. All right, let's get back to this story. So first, let's talk about the spyware that's targeting journalists. It's a hell of a headline, isn't it? US-backed Israeli company Spyware is used to target European journalists. If you're reading news from Citizen Lab, it's almost guaranteed to have to do with government-run spyware, or government-funded spyware, I should say more accurately. The three journalists in question are from an investigative news site in Italy, and the European Union is not happy about it. They put out a statement saying any attempts to illegally access data from citizens, including journalists and political opponents, is unacceptable if confirmed. It's confirmed. The European Commission will use all tools at its disposal to ensure the effective application of EU law. The Italian Prime Minister been dead silent about this. And instead of saying that they didn't spy on journalists, that they said that they respected the law and they haven't done anything illegal to spy on journalists. It's one of those moments where it's like, I don't care that you didn't break the law. It's kind of ridiculous that you didn't have to. The spyware company in question is called Paragon. They have a spyware tool called Graphite. Graphite pops up over and over again on hacked phones. Generally, it's so good at what it does, the device owners never have any idea that it's going on. It's either Apple or other apps that they use on their phone that notice the suspicious behavior and can then wind up backtracking it and reaching out to those people and saying, hey, you may not realize it, but you've got spyware on your device. You might have read about the headline not too long ago. I think I even covered it in my Signal versus WhatsApp video. This spyware was used to target a bunch of WhatsApp users, around 90 of them from 24 different countries. And yes, Paragon is an Israeli company, but as you saw with the Italian journalists, this spyware can be used basically by the highest bidder. There's been so much activity around this spyware recently that it even got all the way to a California court, which awarded Meta $168 million in damages from Israel's NSO group who also puts out spyware and was also used to hack into over 1,400 different WhatsApp accounts of journalists, activists, government officials. There's a lot of political activism going on right now, and I need all of you to know, if you're going to protests and all this kind of stuff, I support you. You need to realize that you now have a different threat model. You are not getting hacked by script kiddies in their basement. You are being targeted by governments with highly funded spyware. There are very different ways to protect yourself. If you follow Citizens Lab, you know that they are not new to finding spyware on journalist devices. And it's the case this time, and it's the case often, that the attack actually comes in through iMessage. So whoever's got their hands on this spyware and the exploits that are in it just sends an iMessage to their victim with no interaction from their target, compromises that device. It does so generally silently. So it's not even like, oh, I got this weird text. As soon as they send the message, they have full control over the device, which includes erasing their tracks. Yeah, even right here in this article, they compare Paragon to another spyware out of the NSO group, the one that just had to pay Meta all that money. Their spyware is called Pegasus. So Paragon and the NSO group, Pegasus and Graphite. They say it right here. There's no link to click. There's no attachment to download. There's no file to open. One moment the phone is yours. The next minute the data is streaming to an attacker. To pivot to the US from all of these European governments targeting their journalists, there was a 2023 executive order that, as of right now, has not been overturned by Donald Trump that prohibits federal government agencies and departments from acquiring and using any of this kind of spyware. It says, including to limit freedom of expression and political dissent, journalists, activists. And even though that executive order still stands, the Department of Homeland Security awarded a one-year, $2 million contract to Paragon to support ICE. There's also evidence going back to 2022 that the DEA has used Paragon and its spyware Graphite in a lot of its cases. So I want to talk about this other story about how some of the Washington Post's journalists have also been hacked recently, to just really drive the point home that if you're writing online about anything having to do with politics and governments, or if you're being any sort of political activist and protesting, that you've got a target on your back. But really quick, before we switch to that topic, to close out this Graphite thing, I'm going to link this in the description below. But Citizen Lab put out a fantastic forensic report going into Graphite and how it takes over the device. This is not ancient news. The vulnerabilities used to get Graphite on these journalist devices were only patched in iOS 18.3.1. This patch was released in February, just a few months ago. And as usual, when Apple releases these patches, they just talk about how that there is some security fixes, and they're very tight-lipped about it. That's why now fast forward to a few months later, and we have some details about the vulnerabilities that were patched back in February. You'll also see sometimes in these Apple releases, they'll say evidence of exploitation in the wild, because Apple will be the ones that actually detect that this exploitation is going on in the wild. They'll patch it, and they don't release a whole lot more information. So it comes to reports like this one out of Citizen Labs for us to figure out more info about what was patched, who was exploiting it in the wild, like Apple saw. So luckily, Citizen Lab got access to the hacked devices from these journalists. The journalists received an Apple notification, and then they sought technical assistance. So I've known people that have actually gotten these alerts. Apple calls them threat notifications. So you'll see something like this: alert, state-sponsored attackers may be targeting your iPhone. You'll get it in email, and you'll get it in text message from official Apple sources. This is a bit confusing because I know a lot of phishing websites like to do the whole, hey, your iPhone's been hacked, it has viruses thing. It's important to kind of look at, well, what website is telling me this? Or if you go and log into your actual Apple ID, it should say something along the top that says, hey, here's a threat notification. And at this point, you're authenticated into your Apple account. This isn't some random pop-up on your device. And hey, while I'm on this page, let's go through Apple's suggestions of what happens when you actually get one of these threat alerts. And they say, hey, at this point, this is nation-state level stuff attacking you. We strongly suggest you seek expert help. You are not the average bear. They go through all the normal cyber hygiene stuff. Keep your stuff up to date with a passcode, two-factor auth, the actual app store. But the actual trick here, if you are in this group of people, journalists, activists, protesters, politicians, you should look at using lockdown mode on your iPhone. At this point, from what I've seen, lockdown mode would have stopped all of these spyware hacks, because they block a lot of the extra features in iMessage that these vulnerabilities wind up popping up in. So you know how when you open iMessage, if someone sends you a link, it'll like do a nice little preview of that link. It'll maybe show you a picture, the header picture. You don't just have the text of the link. If you're in lockdown mode, you get none of that. You get the text that they sent you. You don't get any sort of enriched content. So a lot of people don't like lockdown mode because it doesn't come with that iOS feeling anymore. But if you're being targeted, it's going to strip away a lot of the ways that people would hack you. Web browsing is going to look a whole lot different. It's going to block a lot of things like JavaScript or other dynamic content. So it's going to look a whole lot flatter when you're browsing the internet on a locked down device. Incoming FaceTime calls are blocked unless you've talked to that person in the last 30 days because there has been FaceTime vulnerabilities and also social engineering type deepfake type stuff. When you share photos, location information is going to be blocked. There's a lot of really cool privacy and security features built into lockdown mode. But fair warning, it's going to feel a whole lot different and clunkier than your normal experience. Just search lockdown mode from your settings. It's pretty easy to turn on if you want to give it a shot. All right, so back to the forensics report. So one of the ways that they figured out that, hey, it was the same person that was targeting all these journalists using the same spyware was that the spyware was reaching out and sending this information to the same server. And they said, we identified an iMessage account present in the device logs around the same time as the phone was communicating with the Paragon server. Based on our forensics analysis, we could conclude that the account was used to deploy Paragon's graphite spyware using a sophisticated iMessage zero-click attack. We believe this infection would not have been visible to the target and that this was patched in iOS 18.3.1. So this is case 1, prominent anonymous European journalist. Case 2 of Ciro Pellegrino. This is a journalist that's the head of the Naples newsroom at fanpage.it. So just a few weeks ago, at the end of April, Pellegrino received that threat notification that I just showed you from Apple. And even on their page, they say, hey, seek expert help, like Citizen Lab. They said in that analysis, the device logs revealed the presence of the same iMessage account that was used to target the journalists from case 1. And they associate it to the same graphite zero-click infection. The way this whole spyware system is set up, what Citizen Lab says is that this iMessage account would have been used exclusively by the same customer of that spyware. So not only did they use the same spyware, they think it was the same person using the same spyware. Here you go. Here's another example of one of these threat notifications that Apple actually sends to the devices. Alert, Apple has detected a targeted mercenary spyware attack against your iPhone. They talk about Access Now and digital security helpline that Apple links on their site. There's a small group of people that track a lot of these spyware activities. They all know each other. They all help each other. All right, if you're in cybersecurity and you want to know like the indicators of compromise that they found that's in this forensics report, I'll include the link down below. So switching gears from spyware, but still staying in, hey, if you're a journalist or an activist, something fishy is going on right now. Also, just in the last few days, we've got evidence that China hacked into a bunch of Washington Post journalists. It says right here, staffers were told the intrusions compromised journalists' Microsoft accounts. It could have granted the intruder access to work emails that they sent and received. The reporters targeted included those that report on national security and economic policy, including some of those who write about China. We don't have a lot of detail about this attack, but knowing anything about China getting into Microsoft accounts, I would assume this is some sort of account takeover, maybe with phishing. Maybe they burned a 0-day, but path of least resistance, they probably got access to these people's Microsoft accounts. Microsoft is pretty actively hunting against some of these nation-state threat actors right now, so they are being very tight-lipped about it. Their threat intel team is great. They put out a lot of awesome reports, but when they can't talk about stuff, they don't. And some of this active stuff coming out of China is one of the things that they have a hard time talking about right now. I'm looking forward to the day that we get a ton of information from Microsoft about it. Not only is Microsoft being a little tight-lipped about it, the staffers that were hacked were instructed to not discuss it at all either. One quick shout out, and I'll put this link down below too. This is the Center for Investigative Journalism. A friend of mine, Runa, used to run security for the New York Times newsroom. Not security for the New York Times, for the newsroom. She is very passionate about helping journalists protect themselves. If you're in this space and you're worried about what to do and how to protect yourself, check out some of the talks that Runa's give, the blogs that Runa's written. She has a lot of advice very specific to this space. Oh yeah, right here in one search, there's a YouTube video called Securing Journalists by Runa. So I hope I got the main point across that, hey, if you're writing about this stuff online, governments are looking for any excuse that they can to invade your privacy. I'm not going to be surprised if this year the definition of journalist that is being targeted by this starts to expand to maybe YouTubers, maybe podcasters, maybe just prominent social media figures. If you're politically active in any way, consider this your time, maybe your wake-up call to get some of your cybersecurity in order. Explore things like lockdown mode, but one of the more important things is to keep your devices up to date. It is a cat and mouse game between the spyware developers and people like Apple and Microsoft. The vulnerabilities that they use in the spyware are the things that Apple and Microsoft are fixing in their updates, because there's no such thing as a vulnerability just for the people that intend to use it. So even if you're on the side of, hey, I think the government should be able to get into whoever's device that they think that they've got justification to investigate, A, you're wrong, warrants exist. B, there's no such thing as that vulnerability only being used by people that you agree with. So of course, those vulnerabilities are going to get patched. So you have to keep your devices up to date. If you're on the most up-to-date version of your operating system, generally that buys you a few months before these spyware developers have another vulnerability ready to go. I've seen some data that they run about 4 to 6 months behind the latest releases. And then as soon as they use them, that's burned. If you ever hear me say or anyone say burn a 0-day, that's what it means. They've used a vulnerability against a target. And once they do that, they're going to increase the likelihood that that vulnerability being used gets detected and fixed. One of the other things that I'm seeing a lot of people recommend these days, especially on your phones, is to turn your phone off every night. When they compromise these devices, a lot of times there's a limitation that they have that it cannot actually survive a reboot. I haven't recommended that in a long time, but I'm seeing some people start to say it more and more, especially on iPhones, and it makes a lot of sense. So check out lockdown mode, keep your stuff up to date, maybe reboot your phone every night, use two-factor on everything, buy yourself a YubiKey. I'll put a link down below. It's phishing-proof two-factor authentication. Definitely don't use SMS-based two-factor authentication if you can help it. That's vulnerable to things like SIM swaps. And again, if you're concerned with things like SIM swaps, thanks. Check out the sponsor of today's video, Cape, down below. All right, what'd I miss? Let me know what else you want to talk about on this topic down in the comments. I'm happy to make a part 2. If you know anyone politically active or anyone who writes online about any of this stuff could possibly be considered a journalist, please share this video with them. Hit all the YouTube buttons down below. Follow for more cybersecurity content.